A general election looms. While the Conservatives and Labour seek the keys to number 10.
We know it, he knows it, they know it.
What about the parties next in the polls? The former number 3.
It didn't really work out very well from our point of view.
I think they're pretty useless, frankly.
That really hurt a lot of Liberal Democrat support.
I am sorry.
The current number 3.
And call a general election.
It's where we're going together as a nation.
No man is an island.
The number 3 in the polls.
What do they stand for? Who knows?
I would be very surprised indeed if they won any seats.
We're just warming up.
Well, that's just not going to happen.
On a journey that takes us to the northernmost constituency. We speak to representatives of all 3 to discover who really are the parties that are battling it out to be Britain's number 3. LBC's political editor Natasha tells us why the UK's third party matters.
The third political party, as we know, can still have huge influence over British politics. Cast your minds back to just a few years ago under David Cameron, when they failed to get a majority in the general election. They were forced to look elsewhere to try and get the seats that they needed to form a government with the Liberal Democrats. At the time, they were the third biggest party.
Liberal Democrat Sir Nick Harvey was a minister at the time and later became CEO of the party.
It was a frustrating period. I think the Lib Dems had to do it. I think we had to go in. But to be truthful, it didn't really work out very well from our point of view.
Their voters were so disgusted with the fact that they went into bed with the Tories, as they say.
One way to find out what impact the coalition has had on the Lib Dems' current perception is to ask prospective voters. The Esher and Walton constituency narrowly voted Conservative for Dominic Raab in 2019, and it's a key battleground with the Liberal Democrats and their candidate, Monica Harding. But what's the feeling here amongst voters? Let's find out more.
I feel that the Conservatives are very, very seriously unpopular for excellent reasons.
What do you think a Liberal Democrat is, and what do you think the Lib Dems represent in 2024?
Well, I think that's one of the things that's difficult about Liberal Democrats, because I'm never really very sure.
A Liberal Democrat is, of course, between the hard left of Labour and the hard right of Conservative. And they're going to be keen on community, particularly a local community like Esher.
I think they're pretty useless, frankly.
I don't know who I'm going to vote this year, to be honest. I've always come with Conservative all my life. Since I was 18, when I packed my bag and came here, I voted Conservative. It's sad.
I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the Conservative Party for all sorts of good reasons. And that might mean that people who don't want to vote Labour will vote Liberal Democrat.
Well, they're not going to replace the Tories. They'll help Labour replace the Tories.
Can you name a Lib Dem policy?
Or
value?
Well, they want to be nice to people.
So, dissatisfaction with the Tories and questions over what the Lib Dems stand for. There's a sense that the Lib Dems aren't entirely sure what they represent now. Would that be fair to say in comparison to before?
No, it would certainly not be fair to say that at all. The Lib Dems, I think, still have a set of values which I recognise from being what caused me to join up 40 plus years ago and still I think obtains today. The Lib Dems are above anything else, the defenders of individual liberty, a market economy, the environment, internationalism, human rights.
I think that's a question that Ed Davey would say he's very clear about what they do stand for. Obviously they're on the left of British politics, but they're sort of more right of the Labour Party in many ways, especially on the economic sort of argument.
So where have the Lib Dem community values really hit home?
The Lib Dems have historically tended to be strong both at the extremes of the country. For a long time we held both Orkney and Shetland and Penzance at the other end of the country. Also historically very strong on islands, also very strong in border communities.
And it's those island seats where local issues matter more that could be up for grabs on election day. The battle for seats in Westminster stretches across the entirety of the United Kingdom. We're on our way to Orkney, part of the northernmost constituency, where the Lib Dems and the SNP have been the top two parties in the past 3 elections. It's the perfect illustration of the former number 3 versus the current number 3. 90 minutes off the UK mainland by ferry and 12 hours drive from Westminster, this archipelago of 23,000 people is home to millennia-old historic sites from its Viking days. Its main industries are energy, agriculture and tourism, with the odd distillery to be found too. The Orkney and Shetland constituency delivered the highest no vote against Scottish independence in 2014, and more than 63% voted to remain in the EU. In 2019, 44.8% of voters re-elected Liberal Democrat Alistair Carmichael as MP, over the 34% that voted SNP. Policy decisions that affect these islands are either made centrally in Westminster or at the devolved Scottish Parliament in Holyrood. Liberal Democrat Liam McArthur is the member of the Scottish Parliament for the Orkney seat.
In the simplest terms, what is a Liberal Democrat?
I think a Liberal Democrat is somebody who believes in the value of each individual, and that the only way to enable them to achieve that is to provide them with the kind of necessary tools, but recognising that no man is an island, that the solutions to the issues we face are only going to be found by acting jointly and in collaboration with others. At a time where identity politics is coming more and more to the fore, recognising that all of us have multiple identities. I was born in Edinburgh, I was brought up in Orkney, but I'm fiercely Arcadian, I'm fiercely Scottish, I'm fiercely liberal, I'm fiercely British, I'm fiercely European. None of those I see as in conflict, they are what make me me.
SNP candidate Robert Leslie feels that being independent from Westminster and localising control over energy will be better for Orkney and Shetland.
It's seeking greater equality, more sustainable growth for the economy, definitely a green outlook, energy, having control over energy resource. I think is fundamental to the success of what the SNP would see as a new young independent country. There's no way that Orkney and Shetland should have the highest fuel poverty gaps in Scotland. Given the resources that we have, we're for Scotland. We're always going to stand up for Scotland. Whereas, the Lib Dems spent a time in coalition with the Tories during the austerity era that is unforgivable from my point of view.
The SNP obviously is suffering in the same way that the Conservatives are suffering here in Westminster from having been in power for so long. They're now seen as the incumbent party, and it's easy for voters to blame them and say, well, actually, you've been in power for so long, why should we trust you to continue in power?
Robert feels that if given the chance, he can convince constituents that the SNP are the right party for the region.
I think we can only come to the conclusion that, bringing the powers back into Scotland, running the economy, running our energy system, all these things, for ourselves, having our own civil defence, would be a far better way to run things.
So, a Lib Dem seeking to keep close ties with Westminster, while the SNP push for independence. Behind me lie the Churchill Barriers, built by Italian prisoners of war at the instruction of the then Prime Minister Winston Churchill to defend the British fleet against attacks by the German Navy in World War II. Today, they are not barriers separating rival nations, but causeways linking the Orkney Islands together. In the time that we've spent in Orkney, we've encountered a politics that is inextricably linked to decisions made in Holyrood and Westminster. At the upcoming general election, constituents can rest assured that there will be a civilised and responsible debate between two political parties with widely differing views on the subjects that really matter. Can the same be said in Westminster? Back in Westminster, party leaders are pushing for their message to be heard. There is a growing contender in Reform UK's Richard Tice, who are currently polling third for voting intention. We caught up with him to learn more about the party.
The three key things is firstly, with regard to taxation, we should lift the starting point in which anybody pays any income tax to £20,000 from £12,500. Net, that's an extra almost £30 a week in your pocket. That would help, but fundamentally, make work pay, which is really important. The second thing is we've got a clear plan to get to zero waiting lists on the NHS and healthcare within 2 years. And the third key policy is we want smart immigration, one in, one out.
The election's first-past-the-post system means the candidate with the most votes in a constituency becomes MP, something to which Richard Tice objects.
It's a disaster, and the truth is, I think in Western Europe, it's only used by Belarus, is the other example, which is not great company. And what it leads to is millions of people in safe seats across the country feeling if they're of the opposing persuasion, that their vote is wasted.
It's very, very unlikely that the Reform are going to do well in terms of seats at the next election, purely because of what we've discussed already, because of the first-past-the-post system. It means it's incredibly unlikely that they're going to win even one seat.
It was February when Reform overtook the Lib Dems in the polls, and Richard doesn't understand his opponent's overall message.
What do the Lib Dems stand for? They're very good, all credit to them, at fighting by-elections. And they sort of focus on a specific local issue, but two constituencies down the road, they might fight the next by-election on something completely different. But no one knows what they stand for. We will have our target seats, of course, but I reiterate, we stand everywhere, 630 seats. You have to do that to be taken seriously by the media and by voters.
I think, you look at where they're standing. I think they're only standing in around 10% of constituencies.
Well, Richard Tice told us that he wants to stand in every seat.
Well, that's just not going to happen. He's not got the candidates to do so, and I'm sure he does want to stand as many people as possible. But the reality is, at the moment, they've not got the candidates to do so.
As for Reform UK, I wouldn't care to speculate what percentage of the vote they'll secure, but I would be very surprised indeed if they won any seats. I don't expect to see them win any at all, to be blunt.
So, who does Natasha think is the most likely to be Britain's third party?
I don't think it's going to be Reform. I don't think they're going to do very well at all. I think we're probably much more likely to see the return of the Liberal Democrats, a resurgence of seats in the south of England. No political party is going to be able to promise a golden future at the moment, but with the economy where it is, with our debt pile where it is, any politician that promises you that they're going to be able to completely transform the country, that's probably not going to happen. And to take those, I think those messages with a bit of a pinch of salt. Whichever party wins the next election, they're not going to be able to promise a land of milk and honey tomorrow, because the economic situation is just not going to allow it.
As the sun seemingly sets on an unpopular Conservative government, the polls are backing Labour to take the keys to number 10. But for the rest of the parties, the Lib Dems, the SNP and Reform UK, the playing field's much more open. From the Lib Dems' community focus to the SNP's push for self-sufficiency and Reform UK's desire for outright change. Amidst all the party politics, there's one thing for sure. When the general election comes, the British people will be the ones to decide.